Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. I think especially with the pandemic in the last few years, a lot more people are exploring the idea of a side hustle, especially since now they realize how much they can get done from home when they're a bit more productive without a commute. And I think that it's only going to grow and it's only going to become more obvious that folks need to supplement their income if corporations are not going to increase wages or reduce hours. And I think that what's going to happen is that folks are going to explore more side hustles and that we're going to be part of a much bigger side hustle economy. And that's why I wanted to bring on today's guest, my resident expert on all things side hustle, Nick Loper. Nick helps people earn money outside of their day job. He's an author, online entrepreneur, and host of the award-winning Side Hustle Show podcast, which features new part-time business ideas each week. As chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com, he loves deconstructing the tactics and strategies behind building extra income streams. If you're looking to build your own extra income stream, if you're just starting out trying to identify a good side hustle for you, or if you're a current side hustler just trying to grow and make it your mainstream, this podcast episode is for you. So let's meet Nick and hear more from him. Hey, Nick, excited to have you on the show today.
Likewise. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. Can you introduce yourself to our audience? Let them know what you do.
I'm Nick. I host the Side Hustle Show, coming up on 10 years of deconstructing different business ideas and the marketing tactics that makes them grow. Alongside that, there's the sidehustlenation.com blog, which over the last several years has become a bigger piece of the attention, a bigger piece of the business. Outside of that, married, couple young kids, living the suburban dad dream over here.
So 10 years ago, right? Podcasts have blown up since then. Everybody and their mother has a podcast. But what inspired you to start the podcast back then and the passion you had for the topic?
Well, this is what's funny is it was 2013. It felt late. Even then, there was already, probably a dozen or more entrepreneurial interview podcasts. Does the world really need another one? Like those were the, limiting beliefs that was going through my head. And so it's like, yes, it's obviously more crowded. It's more competitive today. But a year from now, it's probably going to be worse. So, the better time to start is today if it's something that you're considering. And just for a moment on why I'm still bullish on podcasting. It's a fantastic medium that people can consume while they're doing something else, out, driving, running errands, walking the dog, going to the gym. It's a very powerful relationship you can build with people if they spend 30, 40 minutes with you in their earbuds and they do it week after week. I think it's a really cool place to be. And it's something that, I don't know what the latest data says, like only 50% of the population even knows what a podcast is. Like there's still a lot of room left to conquest out there. So still excited about that. But what inspired me to get started was trying to create the show that I wanted to listen to as an early stage entrepreneur that was light on the theory and heavy on the tactics. Like, how'd you get your first customers for that? How'd you come up with that idea? How did you market that thing? Love all that stuff. That was exciting then, still exciting now. It was honestly a little bit of peer pressure. I was like, I'm going to start this blog and people will read my blog because it's so, compelling and interesting. And the podcast was almost like, well, if you're going to have a personal brand, you got to have the blog. Yes, you got to have your home base, but then you got to go out into the world. And that, at that time needed to be YouTube or podcasting. I was like, well, definitely don't want to do YouTube. Definitely was a little less confident behind the camera. Podcasting was the lesser of two evils, and it ended up taking off way faster than the blog did. And it's been a life-changing thing, starting in the corner of the living room with a $60 mic and to be able to reach the audience that you can. Totally life-changing experiment. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I can agree. I've had this for 2 years. We're now doing 5 episodes a week. We've grown
Wow.
immensely. It's honestly my favorite part of my business now, even though it's not my main, money maker. This is one of my favorite things that I do in the business, and it's just such a fun medium and a way to connect with people. So I completely agree with what you're saying, 100%. I wish I had the idea a lot sooner or I had executed on it a lot sooner. But hey, the best time to do it is right when you're ready. This is actually what just occurred to me is that podcast was based on the iPod, right? Which like no one knows what that is anymore.
Right, right. It's a relic.
It's kind of like the floppy disk as the save icon. What is that? What does that mean? So, like, I think actually someone could have listened to your show on an iPod.
I mean, in the early days, well, that was
Yeah.
my first introduction to podcasting as a listener. I
Mhm.
followed some compelling sounding link from Twitter or someplace. And then there's nothing on this page. And it's like, ultimately you see the little player icon at the top and you kind of like, my first reaction was disappointment. Like, oh, you buried whatever was promised in that headline 40 minutes deep into some MP3 file, like pre smartphone. I got to figure out how to get this thing onto my device so I can like, USB it into it was just, it was a mess. And there's still that hurdle, that barrier of entry to get a new listener into your ecosystem. And so that, really hammered home the importance of that compelling title and hook and promise. It's like, I got to find the podcast app and I got to find your specific show and I got to
Mhm.
download that episode. And then I got to find a gap in my day to actually listen to the thing. It's a lot. It's a big ask for people to come in if they've never heard of you.
Yeah, it's a commitment. They're making it you're asking them to make a commitment to listen to you, which is a lot.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
really cool when people do. I'm still surprised that so many of y'all listen every week and know the show, and it's just so cool that they're like, "Oh, wow, there's actually fans of the show." It's nuts. It's just like getting to talk about what you wanna talk about and learn. It's the best experience and best feeling. Can you just give us some stats on the show? I wanna celebrate the Side Hustle show. So can you share any, like, the downloads or the growth?
Yeah, so we're at 550 episodes coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the show, which is just nuts. Recently passed 24 million lifetime downloads. Of those, probably 5 or 6 million were in the last year. So it's very, for the sake of reference, 42,000 in the first 12 months.
Wow.
And it's kind of like you start to see the compound interest of your efforts as you build up that library, you build out that body of work. It takes a while for the word of mouth engines to start spinning and say, hey, I'm trying to put out good radio. And relatively speaking, nobody's paying attention. But it's like it takes a while to get that growing, and it was gratifying even in those early days. Like, is this something I enjoy doing? Check the box, and is it seeing just enough traction to justify continuing to do it, even if the revenue wasn't there in the early days?
Totally. And I want to dive into the topic of your podcast, which is the side hustles, right? We're going to be talking a little bit about side hustling today. And just like what you said about the podcast growth, right? It's playing the long game, it's doing the micro actions, it's getting things started, and it's not immediate results. Like you're never going to expect immediate results. So, can you share with us a little bit about your journey in terms of like why teaching side hustles? Why, what who are you looking to serve, help, and empower with your show and how you do it?
Yeah, it's an exciting place to play in because was always grew up, had some frugality training from mom and dad, and that's kind of the message that comes out of a lot of personal finance books. Live below your means, invest the difference, and wait for compound interest to take effect. But
Yeah,
nobody ever addresses the income side of the equation. Like, there's only so much that you could cut out of your budget. Like, everybody needs a place to live. You got to put food on the table. But the earning side is where the magic happens. Like, that's limitless in a lot of ways. And so it was more fun to talk about that stuff. My original side hustle while I was working corporate after college was a comparison shopping site for footwear. And it was like this 3 years of nights and weekends, like kind of toiling away, trying to build this thing up to the point where I felt comfortable giving my notice at work, turning in the keys to the company car, and saying like, okay, can I really cut my own paycheck? Let's go find out. And having that background and experience, and really ran that business for several years after quitting, even before starting the blog and podcast. I kind of honestly naively thought like, this could be my thing. I'd just be the guy who sells shoes on the internet. But like a lot of businesses had a finite lifespan. I'm really glad to have started several side projects on the side, but really to spread this gospel of the lower risk brand of entrepreneurship. Because so the narrative was save and budget and invest the difference. And on the flip side, an entrepreneur is somebody who jumps off a cliff and figures out how to build the parachute on the way down. You're the person raising venture capital, and you're gonna go big. Like, it was those two things. It's like, I think there's a middle ground where it's probably more realistic for most people who have commitments and obligations and responsibilities. Like, they're not going to be just jumping off that cliff. That sounds terrifying. And at the same time, they also have come to the realization that if I want to accelerate my path to financial independence, I'm going to have to address the income side of the equation too.
100%. The way I would phrase it, because I did this myself, I built my business on the side and then quit my full time job just over a year ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I built my business over the course of 3 years on the side. I called it like the 7 to 10s, like on the 7 AM to 10 AM, 7 PM to 10 PM. People were saying, "Oh, you made the jump off the cliff." And I go, "No, I shortened the cliff to a stone and then I stepped down." Like
Yes,
I shortened the cliff because that was the whole thing was it doesn't have to be a massive jump or an all or nothing thing. We had cash flow planning. We had like when you hit this amount, you are now like you've built enough of a parachute that you can jump off, or you've shortened the
exactly.
cliff enough. And I think people aren't talking about that enough. It's either this like go hard or go home entrepreneur spirit, or it's like, I'm just going to stay with what's safe. And I love that middle ground of, well, maybe we can just like make the cliff shorter.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that was the same thing for me, where I had, this track record of revenue that I don't think it was fully replacing my day job salary at the time, but it was at least enough, to cover my monthly expenses. It's like, well, I'm not going to have to dip into savings. I mean, and had a little bit of runway there too, if something didn't work out. But it was like, well, with an extra 40, 50 hours a week to dedicate to it, I'm confident it could get to that salary level and beyond. So I love that, hearing your story there too.
Yeah. So for those listening who maybe they're working a corporate job, they're trying to do something on their own, or they're dabbling in something, but it's not like turning into a side hustle. Maybe they don't realize it, but it's turning into a side hustle. What do you recommend for ideas for side hustles for people, or where to get started if they know they want to supplement their income, but they're just not sure how to because they're getting so many different things thrown at them for ideas and seeing all these other people doing it? Where can they start?
Yes. So the common advice, and you probably have seen this diagram where it's like your skills are in this box, what should be, what are your interests and hobbies are in this box, and then like what could you get paid to do? And like the magic sweet spot is that where the circles all overlap in this magical Venn diagram. And it's like, well, for a lot of people, my skills and interests are over here, what I've been paid to do, or over this other corner, and like my hobbies are like, there's no overlap. I don't know.
Yeah, they're in different zip codes. What are we talking about?
That's really difficult. And historically, like if you ask me, well, what are your skills? You're like, I don't know. And other people do not lack that confidence. Like, oh, I'm great at this, and this. Like, if that's you, fantastic. Go start a service business around any one of those skills. For everybody else, I think you have to start with the pains and problems approach. And so I call this the what sucks method. And normally like to be a little more optimistic. So you have to kind of put on your Eeyore hat, your pessimist hat for a little bit. Just a notes app on your phone for the course of a week or 2 weeks. Your job is to write down everything that sucks, everything that annoys you, that bothers you, that your spouse or partner complains to you about, that your coworkers are griping about. And you kind of start to develop this muscle of noticing the pains and problems that other people are experiencing, that you're experiencing in your own life, and saying, okay, on the other side of those pains and problems, there might be a business opportunity to make those go away. I think it's a lot easier to sell pain pills than it is to sell vitamins. Like, hey, I need to make this pain stop, and it would be worth it to throw money at the problem to make it go away. And the solution often comes in one of three ways, right? Like the big three business models that almost every business in the world kind of falls under one of these categories. I can sell a service to solve this problem. I can create a product or sell a product to solve this problem, or I could create content around this problem. I can build an audience-based business. I mean, let's look at the example of like a dirty house. And if we could move the camera around, you can see like, yes, this is this is a pain point in our house, but not one that we have taken action on in the near term. And so, but you could see like how different entrepreneurs are going about solving that problem. On the service side, okay, I could hire a cleaning service. On the product side, I could hire, or I could go buy the latest, Swiffer mop or new vacuum thing. And then on the content side, there's tons of examples of like decluttering YouTube channels, or the life-changing magic of tidying up, and all these different online content type of things where it's like, okay, I can help people do it themselves through content.
I love that. So it's basically like taking a single problem and going, in what ways can I solve this? Which ways do I want to, right? Because service, product, and content, it's a very different type of entrepreneur. It's a very different type of skill set. How do you recommend people kind of distinguish the way that works the best for them?
The interesting thing is most of the 500 plus side hustle show guests started with a service based business. It's not necessarily where they ended up, But a lot of people start there because there's almost no barrier to entry. You kind of just stick your flag in the sand and say, hey, I now offer, fill in the blank service. Very low startup costs, easy to get started with. And then eventually may pivot into products and content after that. So I think the faster you can get to that money milestone of getting somebody to pay for your thing, that is encouraging to get going. And the problem with a content based business is that might be months, that might be years. Like it takes a long time to get indexed in Google, to get discovered. And I mean, there's always counter examples of, oh, yeah, my fourth video on TikTok went viral and now I've got 1 million followers. Cool. Like, how repeatable is that? But
Right.
and if you have a longer runway, if you're not the person who's like, gosh, I got to make rent this month, or I got to get out of this dreaded cubicle next month, you have a longer runway to invest in that type of business. So it kind of depends on your near term and long term goals, where you want to end up. But definitely recommend considering that service based business.
And, for those who are listening who maybe aren't completely dissatisfied or they're just not like, burning to get out of that cubicle. Maybe they like their job, they like what they do, but they know that they have a higher earning potential or they're just not happy with their salary. I mean, look at inflation, look at the economy, look at the prices of things and they're going, I'm just not I can't keep up. So I need to supplement my income with something and I need to do something like that. Let's talk about those side hustlers versus, I feel like everyone starts a side hustle and then there's this pressure to make it a mainstream of income or this pressure to grow it and quit your job. But let's talk about that. Are there folks who are just like side hustling and like cruising at the side hustle zone or are they all in growth mode?
Yeah, it's interesting to see. That my original hypothesis was like, why would anybody want to work for somebody else? Like, you gotta get out. It's like, that's not for everybody. The grass is
Yeah.
always greener, and there's some benefits to a steady paycheck and all of that stuff. But there's still that room to use your side hustle time, use your extra 8 hours, your 7 to 10 hours, right, to build something that you care about, that exercises some creative muscle that maybe your day job doesn't. Like my wife is an engineer for her day job, but does family and wedding photography on the side. Not likely to ever turn into a full time thing. I don't think she necessarily wants it to turn into a full time thing, but she's been doing it for, again, 8 or 10 years, kind of similar in tenure to the side hustle show. And they do a handful of weddings a year, her and her partner. And it's like extra, it's like bonus money. It's, really something that is rewarding. And it, at this point now, it shows the kids too that like, oh, you can do something outside of your day job. And hey, where's mommy going? Oh, mommy's going to go take pictures. It's kind of a fun little extra thing.
Yeah, I did that for years actually without even calling it like a side hustle because I wasn't hustling. I was just
Yeah.
going, well, I used to teach group fitness classes at night and on the weekends. And I would teach like 4 classes a week. I would teach Zumba and a couple other classes. And for me it was actually a time saving tool because I was working so much as an accountant and I said, I need to go to the gym. Finally realized I was like, I want to teach this.
Yeah. Double dip. I love it.
I don't wanna make this a full-time thing, but I'm like, I can exercise and make money and see all my friends in the same hour. Cool.
That's fantastic.
Right, so then it actually turned into a compression of time thing for me, where I wasn't hungry for the money, I didn't do it for the money, but I said, "What is something that I do on the side that I can pour into and be better at, and actually create a community around, and actually happen to make money on too?" And when folks would ask me, "Do you wanna take this full time?" I would say, "No, because once this pays the mortgage, I lose the fun, and and it's just stressful because now I'm forced to do the thing I love to do because I have to pay the rent or I have to make money, and I wanted to leave that alone as a side thing all the time because I said if once it becomes the thing that pays the bills, it's gonna turn into a job for me, and I think that that can be a mindset thing as well.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point there. And we've had some advice on the show, like under no circumstance, start a business around your passion. Number one, because if you're passionate about, like people are passionate about yoga and
Yeah.
craft brewing and like, the fun stuff. But this guy, Nick Huber, makes the argument, if people are passionate about it, they do irrational things like work for free. Like that's not a market I necessarily want to compete in.
So true.
Another guy, Paul Jarvis, wrote this book called The Company of One. And it was about like, why do we always chase growth for the sake of growth? He gave me this line that has stuck with me over the years. He said, most goals are fake. And, he set out early in his career, like, I'm going to run $1 million business. And then after a couple months of chasing that goal, he kind of paused and was like, I don't need $1 million business to be happy to support my family. Like, why am I doing this? And he also talked about starting a business around his passion of music. And to your point, after a couple of months, he's like, it became work. It became my job, and it became something I was no longer passionate about, and it kind of destroyed that for him. And so there's a couple risks in chasing that passion or trying to monetize that in some way, like forcing it, where it's totally okay to just let that be a side thing and not have to stress about the dollars and cents.
Yeah, I phrased it in terms of like the phrase cash in greater than passion.
Oh,
That was my thing, was like cash in is better than passion. Do you need money or do you want to have fun? I understand like people are going to say, "Well, you can do both." Yes, you can do both. But my dad taught me when I was very young. He was like, "I know you love to do this, but you also love to go to Disney World and to be able to go to restaurants, and you also love this and your lifestyle. So if you do this, you can live this life and then you have time to do this without making it be your money maker." And that was an enlightening concept to me, going, "Oh, it doesn't have to be one and the same. We don't have to build something based on passion. You can build something that is a revenue generator to open up your time to then be able to spend it the way that you want to." And I think that you made a really great point, Nick, that it doesn't have to be the vehicle through which you do that.
yeah. And what we found, and I don't know if you've found this to be true as well, is like passion tends to come from doing the work. You may not have started out that way, like podcasting. Like, no,
Oh
it
yeah,
would have been
totally.
impossible to have passion for podcasting, for episode one. Like, you didn't know what you were doing. Like, I was painting houses in college, and it's hard to imagine being passionate about house painting. But after the course of a couple summers, you end up walking by like you're looking up under the eaves. Remind me to come back and give these guys an estimate, this weekend. And it's just you kind of through doing the work, you end up getting excited about it. And I think there's Cal Newport and Dan Pink kind of have some data, some research they talk about in their books to back that up, where you start to develop these skills and expertise around the thing that you're doing the work, not necessarily the other way around, like starting with passion and hope it turns into dollars, but starting with skills and then that turns into dollars and passion, like maybe a better equation.
Yeah. I mean, it can be great to have both, don't get me wrong. But I think that when you're starting a side hustle, depending on what your goal is, if you're saying, "I want to quit my full time job," you got to lean into, well, what are people paying for? What problem can I solve that I can generate money with? And there's this woman I follow, Cody Sanchez. Do you know Cody?
Yeah, she's been on the show a couple
She's been on the
times.
show, right? So I love her message of these boring businesses, right? So she owns laundromats, dry cleaners, and other types of, simple businesses that everyone still needs, but or like the vending machines and all the other stuff too, right? It's, oh, well, that's boring. Like, yeah, but it brings in cash flow. And I think that you can have the goal of cash flow, and then you can also have the goal of, yeah, and then we do some fun stuff with investing or whatever. There's so many ideas on how to run a business or how to start a business or even buy a business out there that you can do on the side from a job. It's just unbelievable what opportunities we have right now in this economy, in this world, in this digital age.
It really is fun. We had a guy on recently who was in Melbourne, Australia, who bought a laundromat. I don't know if he was a follower of Cody's or not, but ends up finding this local laundromat and pays a fair price for it based on its revenue history. But what he kind of had in his back pocket was like, oh, I have this background in digital marketing and automation. There's almost no online presence for this thing. If you hadn't have walked past it, you never would have known it existed. So like, oh, so I created the Google listing, the Google Places listing for it. All of a sudden, we start showing up when people search for a laundromat near me, and oh, we added these cashless payment systems to the thing. Like, oh, all of a sudden that just kind of stacking up these incremental wins, which to me is really exciting as a business owner, but especially as somebody coming in as a new asset owner. Like, because now I'm increasing my monthly cash flow, but I'm also increasing the equity in that business if it's going to be eventually resold on a multiple of its monthly earnings.
Yes, absolutely. People don't think about that enough as well too. Is, are you building a side hustle? Is that going to be where you find your home as a business owner? Are you going to position it to sell later? Like all the planning that goes into starting a business, right? I'd love to know, Nick, from what you've experienced, from what you've seen on the show or learned from other stories, because you hear stories all the time of side hustlers. What are the biggest mistakes people are making when they're trying to start or build their side hustle?
I mean, the biggest mistakes, like for me personally, was like the slowness to take action or pay attention. Like, I think that's a really underrated entrepreneurial skill. Just, looking up from your desk every now and again and seeing what is working for other people in your space. Sometimes I am embarrassingly slow to notice that stuff in learning from others and maybe even slow to hire mentors or coaches or buy courses. Like, how can I shortcut the learning curve? That's something like I've always tried to, had the mentality of, oh, I can brute force that or I can figure that out, which was good early on. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, how do you accelerate your education there? But as far as
Yeah.
mistakes from other people or from members that I see of the Side Hustle Nation community, a lot of it is like this waiting for the perfect idea to strike. And I get that 'cause there's been on both sides of the equation. Like, if I only had the right idea, I'd crush it. I know I would crush it. And been on the other side, was, you see the other people with like just lists of ideas. Like, I could do this. It's like, and they have a hard time narrowing it down. But that waiting for the perfect, lightning strike of inspiration and the perfect business idea. I think the perfect business idea is the one that you're excited about enough to take that first step, excited to take action on. Another mistake I see on the maybe opposite side of the spectrum is investing too much in an unproven idea, where this was years ago, but I got an email from a subscriber who was like, I'm $30,000 into this website and it's almost ready to launch or it's almost done. And I was like,
Wow.
do you have any customers? What are the ways you could have validated this thing a more bootstrapped way? And it's like, it's never really done. It's a kind of a living, breathing thing.
And you're gonna have to update it, like, in 10 minutes, like, you're gonna
Yeah.
have to it's ever evolving, trust me, I built mine greatest thing I waited 2 years to really invest in. Like, I'm so happy I waited for that because I stitched together landing pages, Dropbox, and, like, every free service I could until I couldn't, you
Yeah.
know?
It stressed me out. And
Yeah.
we've heard stories of like, oh, I sold $8,000 worth of my first course launch. Oh, what'd you use for your landing page? A Google Doc. I was like, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Like, yes, click here, PayPal me. I was like, oh, this is fantastic.
It is, and people don't realize that that's all you need is a way for someone to pay you easily. And you
Yeah.
know what's really funny? That works better for me as a buyer. I would much rather someone just be like, "Here's the link to pay." I mean, of course, tell me what it is, but like,
Yeah. Yeah.
"Here's the link to pay." Then send me down a huge sales page where there's a button, all these different buttons. I'm like, "What do you want me to do?" Like,
Yeah.
I'm ready to buy it. Why do I have to scroll for a mile to find the button?
Yeah.
So it's just the irony of like, "And you paid how much for this?" And it's totally taking away from your sales. I think we just get too caught up in the other stuff and the details, and I'm like, simplicity wins every time."
Yes, I think so.
It's taking me back to 4 years ago when I built my business. I'm like, "Yeah, kinda hot glue, duct tape, pretty much, made it work," until it's proven. I think that's what people are skipping is the proof. They wanna come out the gate with the pretty stuff and keep up with people, and I just feel like it's all the way back to the fundamentals. Just what do you have an offer and a way for someone to pay you?
A friend of mine, a guest on the show, said, when it comes to sales funnels and automation, start simple, get Ninja later. And most of the time, you don't need to get Ninja later. And so that was something that stuck with me as well.
Yeah, it's very true. I think when you start simple, then you can prove it works and you don't even need the fancy ninja, tactics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are some of the key success factors that you've seen in someone's ability to go from side hustle to mainstream or just grow their side hustle? Like what are some of the key maybe character traits or maybe even strategies and tactics that people use?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind there, and maybe the first is this willingness to take action, not knowing what steps 2 through 10 may be. Just kind of, okay, I'm going to put this out into the world. I'm like a game of chess. I'm going to move my pawn out there and see what kind of reaction it gets, and then I can adjust course. And then the other thing, in addition to starting simple, like we talked about, was having this, maybe 3 to 5 year goal. Like we tend to focus on the costs and risks of failure. Like, what happens if this doesn't work out? Look like an idiot. I'm going to lose X amount of money. But like, equally important is to say, well, what if it does work? And I think the best way to do that is find somebody who is 2, 3, 5 years ahead of you. Say, okay, well, what does their day to day look like? They were reasonably successful at this thing I'm considering. Would that be a win? Right? Are they still working 80-hour weeks, or do they have a little more freedom and flexibility? What is their income picture to the extent that you can find it? And sometimes it's as simple as kind of deconstructing podcast interviews that they've given. And one soundbite that kind of stood out was this is from Donald Spann, who ran a virtual call center business, which is kind of a unique thing. But what he did, he said, I went and listened to every interview that the founder of Ruby Receptionist gave because she would let things not necessarily like slip industry secrets in these interviews, but she would give metrics that we pay attention to. Oh, we have one receptionist for every 10 customers, or different things. Like this was things that he could benchmark against. And I thought that was really really smart to take action and kind of measure what does future success look like, and pairing that with this willingness to take step one and see what happens.
And I think along those lines too, you also look at people who tried what you did and then didn't do it anymore. So, people like, hey, they started that too, but they're not doing it now. Why? Right?
Yeah, I think so. And so, like positioning or choosing a side hustle that is kind of in alignment with your long term goals. We have a lot of people signing up for Instacart and DoorDash, and like these are great, short term, low barrier to entry type of things, like hours for dollars. Yes, but if you need to earn money quickly, absolutely viable options. The problem is kind of your earning potential, your upside is limited by how many hours you have. And so trying to build a business or start with something in mind that has some potential to scale. And I think that's maybe what separates side hustles from just a second job, so to speak. Like, okay, I could go bartend or I could go deliver pizzas, but what's the end game there? And if the end game is an extra $500 a month, sure. But if the end game is something like that's going to allow you to quit your job and hopefully start to decouple your earning power from your hourly input, then consider some different options.
So in your journey too, Nick, when we look at side hustles, or you can also pull from examples you've heard stories. You hear stories all the time, so I love that you're on the show to share this with us. You come across these like forks in the road, or you actually, I kind of look at it as you're on like I'm picturing like a Waze or a Google Maps, and you're driving, and then eventually there's a point where you go, and we got to make a turn here, like the road stop. We got to make a turn. We got to make a turn. And there's just different plot points on your entrepreneurial journey because this is uncharted roads, and you go, okay, that's where that is. We don't wanna go that way. Okay, there's a detour sign or there's whatever. Where are the different ways that you or folks that you've spoken with have, encountered these types of things, these roadblocks or these mistakes, or even just the lessons learned of, "Oh, that's a turn we have to make. I'm really glad that I figured that out," or, "There's a huge pothole here," type of thing? Where are the lessons learned along the way that really impacted your journey as a side hustle grower?
It's an interesting one. I've got a post called My Red Paperclip Journey or something, my red
Mhm.
paperclip story, like kind of how the guy went viral probably 15 years ago at this point, like trading his way up from a paperclip
Yeah, I
to
remember that.
a pen to another thing to like all the way to a house. And so it's like, these different decision points along the way. And my story kind of, talks about buying a truck to paint houses. And it talks about, starting my first website. And so, kind of these different like learning WordPress, like these weird things that didn't seem significant at the time, but in hindsight, you're like, oh, that had a big impact. I'm struggling a little bit to come up with examples.
Those are great ones actually, because I think it's really as simple as the like, I learned WordPress and that opened up all of this. Had I not done that, I couldn't have done X, Y, and Z. I think it's starting the podcast definitely was for you
Yeah,
a big one. And then for me, as an example, right, would be hiring a mentor. And that was a big one. Where I think I really learned a ton was pricing, was learning exactly what you had just said, that, like, giving stuff away for free is doing nobody a good service. Like, once that really unlocked, I was like, "Okay, got it." Those types of different mindset shifts that happen are really big too.
yeah. But it's fun to go back and say, like, even going back to, my very first like marketing internship, which my roommate pointed out this classified ad in the student paper, like, hey, you ought to take a look at this. And like, had he not done that, might never have seen it, might never have gone down the online business, affiliate marketing, SEO, pay per click. Like,
Mhm.
I was just, the domino effect of these like seemingly insignificant things in the moment, really, really interesting.
And I think it's interesting. Let's talk about the evolution of this too, because, it's 2023. I feel like it's never been easier to start something on the side. And I think that like the generations before us, this is a foreign concept to them because it's like, how do you have the time, the energy, and the resources to be able to do that? Imagine if we didn't have the internet. Imagine if we didn't have, what we have now for technology and the ability to be in touch with people in different locations like this, or to market to other markets besides our locality. I think this is just a huge evolution in our ability to actually build these side hustles. You know, let's reflect on that for a second and talk about, do you agree? Like, I feel like there's no excuse not to have a side hustle if you want to start something. There's something for everybody out there.
There's something for everybody, and that was something that has been surprising and inspiring over the last 10 years is just the breadth. That was one of my fears in starting the show. Am I going to run out of people to talk to? Like at a certain point, the well kind of runs dry, right? But like, no, yeah, every week new stuff comes across my desk. Like,
You're helping regenerate it too, which is crazy.
yeah, and yeah, you hear from people, oh, I listened to your episode on voiceover acting from 6 years ago, and now that's my full time thing. Like,
So cool.
is really rewarding and super cool. But it reminds me, so in Reed Hastings' book, he talks about co-founder of Netflix. He talks about the early days where they had to go out and raise $2 million just to build like a payment processing system, server infrastructure. It's like, look, there was no Stripe, there was no Squarespace, there was no Amazon Web Services. Like, the ease of getting something launched so much easier today.
Oh, totally. You have to like manually process credit cards. You have to call them and get the number or like run it through that machine to scan or I just feel like the perspective of knowing that makes I think at least my generation of millennials like we all really appreciate how easy stuff is now because I think we experienced enough of it when we were younger to go, "Oh my god, this is so much opportunity right now to grow businesses online and even just in general."
Yeah, the kids, I don't know, my kids are 6 and 4, and, like, when Disney Plus is slow to load, they're, like, complaining. We're like, "You guys have no idea." And it's, let's dial that back a little bit. It's so fun.
It's funny you say dial because I immediately think of dial up when you say that. Like you have no idea what it's like. No, I absolutely love that. What other creative side hustles? Let's give our listeners some share some examples maybe from the show that you've interviewed of some of the more creative or super niche side hustles that are out there besides the typical DoorDash and stuff that we've heard of.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite stories is Matt Boknock. He's a mechanical engineer in Chicago. His original side hustle was repairing motorcycles in his garage. Like, hey, don't pay dealership rates. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'll fix up your bike. What Matt did, and it was just hours for dollars, service based side hustle. What Matt did that was really cool was set up the camera in the corner of the garage. Like nobody's paying him to do this. Like completely speculative work, but creating content for YouTube. And I think last I checked, he had over 100,000 YouTube subscribers at this point. But over the course of now several years of doing that, he started selling full engine rebuild videos as like digital downloads. He started getting brand sponsorship deals, started making affiliate revenue, started making ad money from YouTube itself. And he ultimately started creating his own like vapor blaster, like physical product that was a tool that he ended up
Wow.
liking but couldn't find one that now that he has his audience to sell to, he can sell this directly to his audience. And so it was a really cool example of the evolution of a service-based business and how it can really transform into something over time, and doesn't do any of this time for hours labor anymore. It's like, well, don't you run out of content if you're not fixing bikes? Like, oh, sometimes I'll buy a project bike or something, or look for common problems that people are complaining to about. They'll send me a part or something. And so that was really interesting. Another one that always comes to mind is Steve Nadramia. He is a high school, I think, history teacher in New York, and his side hustle was renting portable hot tubs. And I was like, "This is a thing!" Like I never. When he reached out, I was like, "Yes, we have to do this episode." Because I was like, "I've never heard of this," and I love these like unconventional rental businesses. Like, how can I
Yes.
buy something once and have it pay me over and over again? It just happened that instead of a you know 3 bedroom, 2 bath house that he was renting out, he was renting out these portable hot tubs. And the ROI math on it was like way more attractive than, traditional rental real estate. And so that one was a ton of fun. When we spoke, he had a fleet of like 25 or 30 of these things. It's like, Steve, where do you keep them all? Like, are they just stacked up on the side yard of your house or in your garage? Or what? It's like, honestly, they're rented out. At most I only have 2 or 3 at a time. So it's like, man, that was a really exciting one. Tons of tons of crazy examples in the archives.
Now I'm interested. These are not like inflatable hot tubs. They are like fully constructed. Like when you say
It-
portable, it just means that we can move them from place to place.
yeah, so it was kind of like the high
Wow.
density foam soft tub, I want to say, was the brand that
Oh,
he
okay.
liked. And he had this whole breakdown. You got to find them used because, if you buy them new, the math doesn't work out. Or, it's a longer break even window until they're profitable. So you try and find, and he definitely had me looking on Craigslist, looking on like Facebook Marketplace. Like,
Yeah.
are there any of these nearby? That sounds cool.
This sounds really cool actually. And I'm going, wow, like, okay, so that's probably cheaper than maintaining and owning a hot tub if you actually just like rent it. So this is an interesting, like, there's the problem pain point argument, but then there's also the uniqueness and luxury side of things too, where it's like it's not necessarily a painful thing, but it's also a, oh, I got to try this.
Right.
I feel like there's an element of that too for some of them. Any parting advice, Nick, for our listeners who are looking at starting or building their side hustles from what you've learned from your guests and your experience?
Yeah, the big thing is to just position it in your mind as an experiment. And I read at one point that at any given point, Amazon is testing something like 1,000 different variables on their website, trying to tweak out, the next incremental 0.01% conversion improvement. And I think we can apply that same principle in our own lives and our own businesses on probably a smaller scale. They're like, I'm going to test doing this thing for the next 30 days. I'm going to see if it works. I'm going to see if I like doing it. See what kind of results I get. And if it does work, cool. If it doesn't work, hey, it was just a test. It was just an experiment. No harm, no foul. We're going back to the drawing board. We'll try something next. Try something the next month, and try and do that in lots of different areas, whether it's on the website. And I'll just, oh, I tweaked this. Let me set a calendar reminder for 2 weeks out. Did it have any impact? And I kind of apply that mentality in lots of different ways. And so if things don't work out, it's not an abject failure. It's just hypothesis disproved, and we'll go try something else.
Yeah, you have control over the stakes, basically.
Yes.
I totally agree. Nick, thank you so much for jumping on the show today and joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it. One more time, where can listeners tune into your podcast and learn more from you?
Absolutely. Would love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show. You'll find it in any podcast app. It's the one with the green cover art with my mug on it. SideHustleNation.com/ideas. If you are kind of on the fence looking for what is in the realm of possibilities, this is my constantly updated laundry list of different ideas. Hopefully get the creative juices flowing over there. No opt-in required.
Love it. Guys, check that out. Links will be in the show notes. Nick, thanks again for joining me today.
You bet.
Hey there, are you looking for more tax and accounting help for your small business, but tired of the confusing jargon or feeling judged for your questions? This is exactly why we created a completely free Keep What You Earn community centered around this podcast. This community is a space to ask questions, hop on our monthly connection calls, and explore more information about our episodes and our guests. Click on the link in the show notes to join us in this month's call to chat with me and our other guest experts. See you there. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.